So, hi everyone. Welcome back to The History Buff. You're here with me, your resident history buff, Artie, and recurring history buff, Anna Morris.
Honourable guest.
Honourable guest. How are you, my darling?
I'm really good. It's a little warm here in Berlin, so Artie and I are all set with our ice cold brewskis.
Those nails are just crazy. Yeah, hold them up for the kids.
Here we go.
Wow. Yeah, look at those. She's got some really incredible
They make
nails.
typing very difficult.
Yeah.
I went on holiday and everything was fine. Then I came back to the office and it was exceptionally difficult. So I've done very little work this week because my nails, they stopped me from doing any work, to be honest.
Yeah, and no, but I think the tap of it on your phone must be like quite satisfying, right?
Yeah, completely. I'm like that.
That makes it worth it. For me, you're that bitch.
Yeah.
That makes it worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I'm not even texting anyone.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like tapping on your phone for no reason. Yeah. So, yeah, welcome back to The Tudors, a real Game of Thrones. And so, yeah, this episode is the third episode in our installment and is going to be about Henry VIII, his young life and early reign.
And I feel like this is where it starts to really kick off. Because let's be honest, as soon as you say Henry VIII, you get these like images of just power and gold and riches and scandal. So yeah, really excited to finally embark on our main character.
Exactly.
As many people would call him, the main character of British history.
And you would say that?
I think there was so much change in his reign.
Yeah.
And
definitely the most influential.
Definitely the most influential because his decisions have changed the face of England. And I think that whole period, because he was very much in the Renaissance period. So and Renaissance literally means rebirth. So you have a whole influx in that kind of 100 years of new ways of thinking, people starting to question, a huge like new intelligence, and everything was changing. And I think Henry VIII really embodied this. His reign was one long period of change.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think this really shows in his personality, which we'll go into in the episode, of really how he wanted to present himself.
Exactly.
And I think Renaissance Prince is what he was really keen to embody.
But the thing is, though, something that we're going to discuss, and what a lot of people don't know, is that actually his kind of title, if you like, was just the spare.
Yeah.
Because, not a lot of people know this, but he wasn't actually the one who was going to inherit the throne.
Exactly. He had an older brother, Arthur.
Yes. So we're going to go into that. But I was going to ask this question, but so do you do believe that Henry VIII is Britain's most, I would definitely say he's Britain's most famous monarch.
Yes, he's Britain's most famous.
But that's because of, the 6 wives.
Yeah.
I would say that's the thing that is...
I think if he was like monogamous with one, no one would...
Yeah, exactly. And it's because of the nursery rhyme that we know.
Divorced, beheaded, died.
Divorced, beheaded, survived. So, that is, I think, part of the reason why he is so famous, or I guess infamous, the way you look at it.
I think it's also a lot of if you think of the early portraiture kind of coming out of that period, and, Renaissance was very glitz and glamour, but these huge self-portraits of kings, and if you compare his portrait to that of his
famous
father,
one of his bulging codpiece, and he's like...
it's iconic.
Yeah.
But if you compare the portraits of him versus those of his father, the way that he is, even his stance, the colours used, and I think...
Whereas Henry VII is like very kind of like, not demure, but like a lot more austere.
Yeah, for sure. A lot more mysterious, maybe a lot more removed, whereas Henry is like bold. And I think with the Renaissance as well, there was definitely a improvement, shall we say, to the kind of, not the ink, the paint used. They were mixing different colours. I can't exactly remember the chemical makeup of it, but using egg yolks and things to make that real like gold colour. So Henry obviously was painted larger than life and seen as this. He was he made himself godly almost.
Yes. And I think he really understood that. He really understood that, like, he is meant to be God's representative on earth.
Absolutely.
And I think he took that role very seriously.
Very seriously.
After his Henry VII, so his father's reign, which was pretty, not austere, but he wasn't extravagant. And when Henry VIII came to the throne, he was like, okay, right, I'm going to have a proper court with, lots of, with all the kind of bells and whistles.
Yeah.
So our main character, so if you like, are the most famous monarch
Our protagonist.
Our protagonist or antagonist, whichever way you're looking at it. But no, but it is interesting because he did go from this Renaissance prince to a pretty horrible tyrant in his later reign. So, but anyway, we'll get into that.
For sure. I mean, so firstly to say, we can speculate about the early years of Henry VIII. However, it will just be speculation.
Yes.
What we do know is as the spare, he wasn't raised, with this education to become the king, which meant although he was highly educated, he had a lot more freedom. His upbringing, he was very cold as a child because he grew up with his sisters and his mother in the countryside, very carefree and very, without this burden on his shoulders, knowing one day I will be king. Hugely intelligent boy and man. Highly, I think he spoke like 5 different languages, music, poetry, and he was a romantic. He was very, maybe it was his kind of feminine environment, maybe it was these ideas of chivalry. But if we think that he married his brother's widow, Catherine of Aragon, and she was very highly regarded, and I think he highly respected her as well from, coming from the background. It was a very important alliance for England to have. And his early, from various accounts, we know they were very, very happy. But sadly, their marriage was completely shadowed by loss.
But also just Henry's overarching desire, need for a son.
It was a need because as well, you have to think that Henry, as he was growing up, he saw his father engaging in a lot. I mean, he was always under threat. I mean, the first half of Henry VII's reign, Henry VII, there was constantly people pretending to be an heir, or there was a lot
Perkin.
of exactly your favorite.
Oh yeah, our boy Perkin, and then who's the other one? Lambert Simnel.
And so he witnessed, his father was always under enormous stress to maintain the throne, and this definitely would have resonated with him. Kind of this fear that he can be overthrown at any minute, and there are enemies.
Yeah.
And I think this would have definitely influenced him in seeing how important it was, especially with the loss of his older brother. When his older brother died, he probably thought, thank God there's another one.
Yes, exactly.
Because otherwise, you're back to square one.
And the thing is, all of this mixed together, he is a fascinating person.
Yeah.
And the thing is, because he's so fascinating, because he was so influential, because he is the most influential monarch in British history, we're going to break his life down into 4 episodes. So
aren't you the lucky one?
Yeah, you're the lucky one. So we're going to start this episode, with his early life and his early reign. Okay. So the story begins on the 28th of June, 1491. So that is when Henry is born. He's born at Greenwich Palace, and he is the second son of Henry VII and Queen Elizabeth. Okay, Queen Elizabeth of York. So the first son, Arthur, Prince Artie, he was born on the 20th of September, 1486. And then you also had other children as well. You had Margaret in 1489, Elizabeth in 1492, Mary in 1496, and Edmund in 1499. Both Edmund and Elizabeth don't survive that long. And now, the thing about Henry is that from a young age, he was actually showered with titles. He became the Constable of Dover Castle in 1493. He also became the Lord Deputy of Ireland in 1494, but there were obviously like real deputies doing the actual work over in Ireland. So and he was raised at Eltham Palace. So he was surrounded by his sisters, his nurses. He was pretty mollycoddled.
Yeah.
He received a prince's education. Likely he was taught grammar, rhetorics, poetry, ethics, history,
theology.
And theology.
Yeah, he was really interested in theology.
And also his handwriting was is interesting to look at because it's very like his mother's. And so
interesting.
Yeah. And because the way he flourishes certain letters, historians largely agree that
his mother would have had an impact in his learning.
Or actually taught him.
Yeah.
Or actually taught him herself. Yeah, exactly. Given a very strong grounding in the Catholic faith, which is ironic considering what is going to happen. But yeah, and he would actually later write Assertio Septem Sacramentorum, which is defense of the seven sacraments. And this impresses Pope Leo X, who is so impressed that he grants Henry the title
Defender of the Faith.
Defender of the Faith.
Which is still carried
by the British monarch.
Yep.
So
the irony of that.
Yeah, it is kind of,
actually, this goes a little bit off topic, but I was going to say, I think King Charles has asked to make it Defender of the Faiths. This is something, yes. I don't know if it's actually gone through.
Well, no. I guess because it's to make it kind of more accessible, like more inclusive. Yeah, more inclusive. Yeah, exactly. But then something that would really affect his life, when he's just 3 years old, he is invested as the Order of the Knight of the Bath. So this is really kind of like his first taste of like ceremony, and it's crazy. So he's 3 years old, and he basically had to learn an oath of fealty by heart. Robes had to be made for him for this induction because he was
like a special baby onesie.
Yeah, pretty much, because he was so young. And this poor 3-year-old had to like get in a bath, and then his father came and made the sign of a cross on his shoulder, making him a knight. And then he had to stand vigil in a church all night. Can you imagine?
Stand at 3? Did you stand at 3 years old?
I don't know. Mum, can you go back to me on that? But no, I'm not sure. I think my twin sister definitely stood before me. But yeah, so he basically was inducted as this knight with 22 other men who were like grown men, and he was 3 years old. So his father, Henry the Seventh, made the cross on his shoulder whilst he's sitting in the bath, makes him a knight. And yeah, he got like an absolution, and he then has to stand vigil all night in a chapel. He got this taste of ceremony, but also what he did is he then was able through that to see a jousting competition. And I think this really did have an impact on him because he first saw the world of knights for the first time.
Yeah. I think it's, again, it's hard not to go into full kind of psychoanalysis mode of historical figures, but for sure, someone who to be surrounded by such glitz, such ceremony, arguably because his father was reserved, his exposure to it was much less. So when he did see it, he's like, I want more of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
and the two of them, they had a bit of a strained relationship, I think.
Yeah, I think firstly, his father was, probably fairly absent, but also this is the thing, when Henry comes to the throne, he's 17, he's definitely got these ideas of chivalry, of knighthood, of success. And his early years, we could say he was manipulated because there is this political elite, the ruling aristocracy, and they were taxed so heavily under Henry VII that bring in his 17-year-old son, fresh, wants to have a reign larger than life, a Renaissance prince, and they encourage, if not really influence him, to be the opposite of your father. You don't want to be this stingy, mysterious, kind of demure monarch.
Yeah.
You want international fame. This is what being king means.
Yeah.
International fame, generosity, riches.
Yeah, celebrity king,
because when he comes to the throne, and this is something that I'll talk about a little bit later, the landscape of Europe at the time, yourself as a monarch, you're only as credible as your image.
Yes.
And this is where Henry VII, although he was on paper, Henry VII, I think I mentioned before, is my favorite Tudor, but although he was an incredibly successful king in a lot of ways, his reputation was completely annihilated.
Exactly.
When Henry VIII comes to the throne, he is absolutely shredded by the political elite in the country who want to mold Henry VIII into the opposite of his father.
Exactly. And because, as we said, Henry started out as the spare, and he is still the spare at this point in his life. So after, he's invested as the Knight of the Bath.
After he's had his bath.
after he's had his bath and then got knighted by his dad. Sounds like an average night, really.
Yeah,
getting
like
having a bath. Yeah, yeah, getting knighted in a bath in Berkheim. Love that. That sounds like a euphemism, doesn't it? Yeah. So basically, yeah, his father, so Henry VII, is very aware of the need to secure alliances, and he can see obviously that Spain's star is on the right, has risen, because by that point Spain is like the big European power, and so he forges an Anglo-Spanish alliance against France. So with Isabel and Ferdinand of Castile and Aragon. And so the proposed bride from Spain is Catherine, the youngest daughter of Isabella I and Ferdinand II. So Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. So it was promised by the Treaty of Medina del Campo on the 27th of March, 1489, only when Arthur was like 3 years old. And they would marry once they reached canonical age. So when they were age of consent. Now, Catherine's dowry was actually set at 200,000 crowns. So equivalent
Which
to
is an insane amount.
Yeah, it's about £5 million in today's money. A lot of money. And now Arthur was actually below the age of consent. So this actually required a papal dispensation to be able to get him married. And the papal dispensation was issued in February 1497. Basically, yeah, Arthur and Catherine, they are engaged. And so Catherine eventually arrives in England on the 2nd of October, 1501. And the two of them do actually get on. And basically, the marriage ceremony was held on the 14th of November, 1501, and held at St. Paul's Cathedral. Now, so this looks like the Tudor dynasty is now secure. Okay, so they marry, but then both Catherine and Arthur become ill the next year in 1502 with English sweating sickness. So Catherine recovers, but Arthur dies on the 2nd of April.
And it's important to note that because they were young and because they did get ill fairly quickly, later on, well, Catherine swears before she's then kind of married to Henry VIII, that the marriage was not consummated.
Yes.
Because they were so young and then they got sick, which led to a papal dispensation saying that Henry VIII may marry his brother's widow.
Exactly. And the thing is, so Henry, obviously, with the death of Arthur, becomes the heir. And obviously with that, his circumstances obviously change drastically.
Yep.
So his education would have been changed to include things to prepare for him for being king, like statecraft, governance. And obviously there was a lot more scrutiny over his marriage prospects. As we said before, he had quite a strained relationship with his father, who was quite distant. And to make matters worse for his father, for Henry VII, so Henry VII's wife, Elizabeth of York, dies a year later in 1503. And this turns, I think, Henry's father, so Henry VII, into an even more kind of miserly man who was like more withdrawn and more distant.
I don't think he was very warm.
Yeah, no, and you can sort of tell that from like the paintings of him.
Yeah,
you can. I think tell that he wasn't a very warm person. He was just very kind of.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was for the time that wouldn't have necessarily been unusual, but in especially if you compare it to Henry VIII, all the accounts are like he was larger than life. He liked to have fun. You know, there was a lot of energy around him at court. There was a lot of laughter. There was a lot of celebration. And I think his personality, that was a reflection of his personality. Whereas Henry VIII. Yeah. And Henry VII was withdrawn, bit of a.
Well, he liked to keep his own financial records,
bit miserable,
and like to just like sit with his accounting books. So that kind of just says more than anything else, really. The fact that he enjoyed,
just like the weirdo doing. Like
exactly. The geek. Not only does Henry now become the heir to the throne, he also inherits Catherine from Arthur. And they have to get a papal dispensation in order to marry, as they are technically siblings-in-law. The thing is, I didn't know this, but Henry VII actually initially refuses to allow the marriage because he's only had half of the dowry from Ferdinand and Isabel. And the thing is, Henry VII actually, because Catherine's living in England at that point, on her own with her household. So she's now lost her husband. And Henry VII stops giving her money, keeps her secluded. And then in 1504, her mother, Isabel of Isabel of Castile died, and her sister Joanna and husband Philip inherited the Castilian throne. So that meant that because Spain then became more separated, it basically meant that Catherine's worth as a bride
also halved.
Yeah, halved. So Henry VII, I think, thought that Henry could do a lot better. And so, and also he was very handsome. And this is what I think a lot of people don't know, is that when Henry was young, he was a very handsome
He was
boy.
over 6 foot tall, which at that time was
very rare.
Incredibly tall. He was built, he was super active. He was like very, very dashing and very striking. And I mean, he was a real catch.
So Henry VII basically holds out for a better kind of marriage proposal for Henry. So yeah, basically because Henry VII only had half the dowry, basically meant that, yeah, he refused to allow them, Henry, his son, and Catherine to marry. By the way, also bear in mind, Catherine is 7 years his senior.
Yep. However, it does need to be said, like, the alliance still at this point between England and Spain is crucial because England is so on the fringe of the continent. Henry VII hasn't put England at the time of Henry VIII's ascension to the throne. England is kind of forgotten.
Yes.
It's still, I mean, Henry VII, one of his key aims was to secure England and to kind of decrease expenditure to fill up the royal coffers. Now, this meant...
Which he did very successfully.
Which he did very successfully, but it meant he did not take England into international battle, which was so expensive.
Yes.
And in those days, to get credibility, to get a name as your to be king or to be seen as ruler of a successful and mighty empire, you had to win international battles.
Yes, exactly.
And England's now gone through, over 100 years of kind of drawing back. I mean, Wars of the Roses, that's domestic battles. And international fame was not on Henry VII's to-do list. So England is withdrawn, and therefore an alliance with the most powerful kingdom at the time, Spain, is still in Henry VII's interest, even if they haven't coughed up half the dowry.
Yes, exactly.
Which is why he gives permission in the end, I think.
Yes. Well, no, it's basically so Henry VIII, well, not Henry VIII at that point, Prince Henry, he is very annoyed at his father. He wants to marry Catherine. He meets her, falls immediately in love with her, wants to marry her, but Henry VII still doesn't allow it. He says, no, you might have other options, all of this kind of stuff. But then obviously on the 21st of April, 1509, Henry VII dies, we think from tuberculosis. They're not quite sure, but basically, yeah, he had been very ill and he finally died. And so then obviously Henry becomes king. He becomes Henry VIII. So on his deathbed, Henry VII has said to his son, you need to marry Catherine of Aragon. Okay, so I feel kind of sorry for Catherine because she had been, held for 7 years in England, basically at ransom almost. And I mean, we'll talk about this more in the next episode when we go into details about the first three wives. But yeah, it was quite a torrid time for her. So I do feel quite sorry for her, to be honest. So
let's set the scene.
Let's set the scene. So he becomes king, and immediately Henry VIII, the first thing he wants to do is set himself apart from his father.
Yes. So how's he going to do this, apart from personality-wise?
So you think he knew that how unpopular his father was?
Absolutely, because I think it was a big part of when he set up his court and his advisors. His advisors were very heavily speaking against his father. Like we said before, Henry VII's reputation was shredded. Henry VIII made himself quite popular by beheading his father's tax collectors.
Yeah, he arrested Richard Empson and Edmund Dudley.
Immediately gains him a huge amount of respect and liking.
Because they were corrupt tax collectors, basically.
Or even just tax collectors, to be honest. Like the way that Henry VII set up his tax system, the ruling classes, the aristocracy, they had to pay a huge amount of tax to the crown in various different shapes and forms. And they obviously used this young king coming to power, the 17-year-old, to try and get out of that, which they successfully did, because Henry VIII's image, he wanted to be seen as generous, as flamboyant.
Exactly.
And he wanted to be this Renaissance prince.
Yes, and so making all these plans. So first of all, immediately to try and cut himself off from his father, executes his much-hated tax collectors. He also promised fair justice for all as well.
Whatever that means in the 1500s.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he pardoned those wronged in the past under his father's and the thing is, this is the first time that a printing press was then used for propaganda for a new reign. And it said they had leaflets distributed saying that it was from Henry's good heart.
Yeah, seen. So he's now then. So he's gotten rid of Empson Dudley. He's then pardoned those who were in prison under his father, and he is therefore seen as merciful. This merciful king who is beloved by all. And that's how he wanted to portray himself, which he did really, really successfully.
Yes.
Just from his living in absolute splendor, his very generous, the amount, I can't remember the exact figure, but the amount he used to spend on a weekly basis was insane.
Really? So he blew his father's
savings. Right. The coffers were full, and he emptied them so quickly. And yeah, because obviously one of the first things he did was say, I will get England back on the map. I want to be seen as the mighty king. Therefore, cue the invasion of France in 1513.
Exactly.
So he gathers up his troops, and bearing in mind there has always been a rivalry between France and England, there was very little fighting going on in the reign of Henry VII, but obviously Henry VIII wants to besiege France. And so there's a battle that took place in August 1513 called the Battle of Spurs. Mm-hmm. Now, it was won by the English.
And they captured Tournai and Terouanne.
So the capture of these two French cities, in reality, they were pretty pointless.
Yeah.
They weren't huge cities. They didn't give you a huge amount of power, or they weren't even seen as we've invaded France. However, the PR, and go back to your kind of the printing press, the rise of the print, the written word, it was advertised in England as the mighty young king gains territories in France, the capture of Tournai, and in reality the battle is now called the Battle of Spurs because there was very little fighting. It's called the Battle of the Spurs because the French cavalry actually...
Not the football team.
No, not
the football team. Okay, right.
Not quite.
No.
But they...
See, you can tell how much I know about football.
Yeah, very little. But so the French cavalry actually, as soon as they saw the English, they turned and they kicked their spurs and rode away.
Oh, okay. So there was no resistance.
There was no. So it wasn't this, huge win. It wasn't this like we've absolutely annihilated the enemy in battle. It was very much he arrived in just outside of Calais and the French ran away. And then he marched to two cities and took them. However, the point is Henry's credibility through this absolutely rose through the roof. He's now seen as the young king who stepped into his father's shoes and who will bring glory back to England when there hasn't been any for so long. Yeah,
after his father's I think if you could...
A gloomy reign.
Gloomy reign, but also if you could sum it up in one word, it would be cautious. Way too cautious.
Sure.
Way too cautious.
Way too cautious.
And defensive.
He very much played on the
very defensive.
I suppose he almost, I suppose he had to. But the point is that Henry is seen as merciful. He's seen as
Well,
glorified.
That's how the
seen-
propaganda portrays him.
Yeah, for sure. This is how he was seen, and this is why he's so popular, especially in those early years.
Yes.
His popularity goes through the roof. Suddenly, he's putting England on the map.
I think part of it is also because of his physical appearance. A Venetian ambassador reportedly says that he was so beautiful that he was almost feminine in his beauty, but in like a really
masculine, sexy way.
Anyway,
I mean, he was seen. He was
the embodiment of
a Renaissance king, and he was also seen as, bearing in mind the crown at that point, you were God's representation on earth. Almost, it was given to you, but it was God's gift to you.
Yeah, and he leaned into that.
He leaned into that massively. He was. If you look to him, you'd think he was royal and holy, you know. And he obviously thought it was his birthright to be king, but he used that, and it definitely worked.
I mean, you know, when he comes to the throne in 1509, he inherits all of these riches from his father. And to be honest, I think if I was in his position, I would be, after, you know, years of kind of austere, kind of like, you know, being like really cautious, guarding the throne, blah, blah, blah. I would kind of be, and I saw the treasury was as full as it was, and it was full. I would be like, okay, yeah, let's have a bit of fun here. Wouldn't you as well?
Obviously.
Of course. Like, and
of course you would. Also, like a beautiful Spanish wife, and also what's interesting, so this is kind of, it goes back to what I said before. The rise of the old monarchs die, and you have their heirs take over. You have Charles I, the kind
in
of
France.
the very flamboyant young French king. You have Henry V,
who screwed everything that moved, by the way.
Everything, and everything that didn't.
Yes.
But then you have you have Charles V, who's Holy Roman Empire. Then he was also a Habsburg, so he got all the Austro-Hungarian lands. He got territories in Italy. He got the lowlands. His rule was massive.
Yeah. And
then Henry VIII, who wants to compete with that, because if you put, I don't know, 3 18 to 22-year-olds in a field with loads of money and riches and they all thinking they're God's gift on earth, they're going to flex.
Exactly, yeah.
They're going to do some flexing.
Yeah, do some flexing, exactly. So, I mean, yeah, I guess, you're kind of talking about it now, but like the state of Europe at the time, as you said, with these new monarchs, it was a new kind of generation. They were all very young.
Renaissance in full flow.
Renaissance in full flow. So Spain being the major power. And the thing is, though, still at this point, the Catholic Church does dominate religious life. But obviously, what we're then going to come into is that in 1517, you then have the Reformation beginning. And this obviously then leads to a lot of, religious upheaval across Europe. And obviously that comes to England. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's not just through that. You also have, economic changes. You have the exploration of the New World. Also, yeah, as you said, the Renaissance was in full swing, offering, advancements in art, science, literature, and chiefly humanist thinking. So keeping the church out of, the way they were thinking. Yeah. So honestly, you could argue this was the beginning of the Enlightenment, really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
the roots of the Enlightenment.
I think so obviously when we mention Henry's early reign, there is a very important character who we have to talk about, which is Thomas Wolsey.
Yes.
Now, Thomas Wolsey was the
son of a butcher.
Artie loves this fact.
So no,
it's like the rise.
Yeah,
of the son.
So yeah, he was the son of a butcher. I mean, I would definitely say Henry had multiple chief ministers in his time, but I think his most famous and I think most influential.
Absolutely. I mean,
either that or Thomas Cromwell.
No, well, early reign Thomas Wolsey, because Thomas Wolsey was a fantastic organizer, litigator. Yes. I mean, there's different ways of looking at this because ultimately Henry VIII is king. But if you say how influential was Thomas Wolsey, how much power did he actually have? Thomas Wolsey took care of everything that allowed young king to gallivant off, go hunting, jousting.
And Henry loved that. Like, he would literally be carrying his, state box, his state papers, whatever. And but the thing is, Cardinal Wolsey, Thomas Wolsey, he knew that Henry wanted to go and do those things. So he would be like, oh, sire, give me these. I can deal with these.
Yeah,
and
you
Henry
go
was
off
just
and have fun.
Yes, exactly.
Literally.
And because also you've got to remember that Henry was so young. When he came to the throne, he was 17. So like he was so young, he was basically living his best life.
Yeah.
And so you then had this chief minister who was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of the governing. You go and be a king. You go and enjoy your kingly,
benefits.
Yeah, your kingly pastimes."
The thing that Thomas Wolsey, because Thomas Wolsey was also the papal legate, which means he was kind of the representation of England in Rome.
Yeah, so he went to Rome a lot.
And he was excellent at getting things done. And an example of this, and I think this lulled Henry VIII into a kind of sense of security, because actually when it came to church matters in England, Thomas Wolsey, who was the archbishop and the cardinal, he could take care of it. He had a good relationship with Rome, and he actually managed to get a lot of things done.
He did.
And Henry VIII kind of thinks. So I think this later, when we do talk about the break with Rome, we have to remember that actually Henry didn't have any trouble getting anything he wanted, because Thomas Wolsey could sort it out. And Thomas Wolsey was a fantastic administrator, fantastic PR guy. I mean, in 1518, there was an international treaty called the Treaty of London, which basically hoped the 20 leading states across Europe would bring them to peace, because there's always fighting. And it was initiated by representations of England and France. Now, England, 10 years ago, completely irrelevant. Fast forward 1518, England is playing host to 20 leading nations in Europe, signing this international peace treaty that would support the Pope. And Wolsey put on the most insane display of riches and glory on English soil, and everyone is in England and everyone is celebrating in England, and England is suddenly at the forefront of peace in Europe. Henry VIII is being branded as not just the Prince of Renaissance, but the Prince of European peace.
Right.
And the way Wolsey created this was just incredible.
Yes, it's kind of crazy to think that this butcher's son ended up having such a big impact on.
I mean, Hampton Court was built for Wolsey.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Henry VIII built it for Wolsey.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, crazy. I thought it was built for Henry VIII.
No, he built it for Wolsey and then moved into it after he cut off his head.
That's crazy, Lena. But okay, so yeah, he became Lord Chancellor of England. I guess you could say that's basically the chief minister.
Yeah.
In December 1515. And the thing is, Wolsey aimed to make England a central power in Europe.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of his so basically you could say that actually for, I think the whole time that Wolsey is in power doing this stuff with Henry VIII, he is really pulling a lot of the strings, because Henry is not really...
He's not that interested.
He's not that interested.
In doing
he doesn't even like writing. Henry VIII doesn't even like writing.
Even though he has his mother's Fs.
Yes, exactly. But no, he, as you said, promoted European-wide peace treaty in 1518. What's crazy is that obviously Henry VIII then would have got the... So basically, Cardinal Wolsey is very happy to do all the dirty work, the hard work, and then let Henry take all of the credit. But he knows, because he's doing the actual hard work, he's really the one wielding... He is really the one wielding the power.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, in those days, anything you did for the king anyway. But the king was very close with Wolsey. I mean,
they really liked each other.
He rewarded Wolsey with palaces and riches and titles, and, the post of papal legate and all this stuff is given to Wolsey. So Wolsey was 100% the second most important person in England. He was also very important in the international church as papal legate. He was head of the clergy. He was a statesman. He was one step below the king. And actually...
He was basically prime minister.
But maybe even higher. Maybe even higher. Like, What's that?
Well, I guess because he had such
El
like...
Presidente.
Well, no, I mean, I guess because he had such unrivaled access to the king. But the thing is, though, that Henry really liked him because the thing is...
Because he also enjoyed to have fun. There was all these stories about them going hunting.
Yes,
together.
exactly. And Wolsey was very charming. He was very charismatic. He told jokes. And
he was hated by the
He
other
was
people,
hated
though.
by all of the other
They
people
were
in the court.
obviously all jealous. And
No,
they
but
were
you know
all
why?
joking about him being the butcher's son.
No, but and they would because they thought of him as an upstart. But also, he was very witty and very clever, and he enjoyed humiliating people on Henry's council.
Yeah.
And he did very often.
Henry obviously found this really jokes.
Yeah, exactly. So
I think between them, you couldn't get like a word in edgeways or anything.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It'd be like me and you.
Yeah,
I'm Henry, you're Wolsey.
Yeah.
Fine, you're Henry, I'm Wolsey.
Yeah, because I'm always like, wait, hang on.
You always whack your finger.
Yeah.
You're like,
we gotta stick to this. But okay, so it's hard to overstate Cardinal Wolsey's effect on England. I mean, later it's his failure to get a divorce granted from Rome, which is what brings about his downfall. But we'll go on into that in the next episode.
So obviously you have people scheming against him, but I think obviously with Wolsey, again, because he was so good
and so competent,
he managed to get Henry VIII everything he wanted. So Henry, I think, when he went into this whole, again, we'll talk about this, when he went into this divorce, this idea to annul his marriage, he thought Wolsey, no problem. Wolsey has never failed him yet.
Yeah,
Wolsey
exactly.
has never failed
He'll
him
get
yet,
it
and
done.
he always managed to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But the one thing I would say as we kind of round off, Henry VIII's early years were hugely successful in the sense that he managed to do everything he wanted to do in his early reign. He comes out, he's got a wife, international, he's very prominent on the international stage now. He did obviously suffer a lot of loss because Catherine of Aragon miscarried so many times. They lost his, all the sons.
Yeah.
And this kind of coming into the next chapter when we start talking about his wives and the annulment and the break with Rome, this definitely had an impact on him. But apart from that, he was flying high. He hit the ground running as a king, and he soared until...
Yes, his early reign, I think people really looked at him and was like, yeah, no,
wow.
we've got an amazing... Yes,
it's
exactly.
Impressive. And I think another thing that I will quickly mention is there's a fantastic event in 1520 called the Field of the Cloth of Gold.
Yes.
And this is a really good insight into not just the European stage at the time, but the radiance of Henry and what he was up against. Is basically a 5-day event that was seen as a treaty, as a friendly treaty between France and England. Francis I, Henry VIII meet up, and it was called the Field of the Cloth of Gold because for kilometers and kilometers, all these golden tents were set up, and it was literally 5 days of feasting, jousting.
Yeah, sporting competitions, cultural exchanges, political intrigue.
These two young kings, it was basically a dick swinging contest. It was who's the richest.
And they wrestled.
Famously had a wrestle.
Henry lost.
Henry lost. But you can imagine these two young, glorious kings rolling around, just wrestling each other. There's so much competition there. But it's really this new era of ruling.
Yes, pretty much. And it's so the Field of the Cloth of Gold, it is, very, I guess you could say quite important because it sort of served as like this cultural exchange.
Yeah.
And the thing that's funny is that kind of despite this outward display of friendship, the meeting was kind of, I think it was definitely marked by like underlying
there
political...
was so much tension. So much tension.
But also they had all of these...
But they loved it. They
loved it because it was a chance for them to kind of, be fierce.
Two young Renaissance kings like rolling around.
Also jousting. Like why the hell would you run, would you ride at someone with a thing?
Wait,
are you asking to get killed?
I thought you were going jousting tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, we are.
What, you don't want to come?
No, we are.
Yeah.
No, I forgot about that.
Oh, or do you confuse it with archery next weekend?
Yeah. And then hunting the week after, yeah.
I would love to joust you, Marty.
Oh my God. With a what's it
like
called?
a foam noodle.
Exactly, a foam noodle, exactly. Nothing harder than that. Thank you very much. But
That's going to be on, check out our TikTok.
But it's like,
Nazi jousting.
but like, did these fucking kings have a death wish?
Yes.
They did?
No, it was
Yes.
danger.
No.
It was like, the more dangerous, the better. They wanted to be shown.
Yeah,
in
they wanted to show off.
glory.
They just wanted to show off.
It was 5 days of showing off, and who could show off the most. And it was honestly,
It
but
does
people
look
loved
amazing.
It.
It does look
People
amazing.
Loved it. They were like, "This is what we expect from a king."
Field of the Cloth of Gold. We'll show you some pictures. Oh my god, it looks incredible.
I would love to go. It's
And
like a modern, early modern festival,
And it's called the
1500 festival.
Field of the Cloth of Gold because there's lots of gold, like.
Everything's gold. Every
Everything's
tent
gold.
was gold.
Yeah, every tent
and
was gold.
it stretched for kilometers and kilometers.
And so, yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, both kings tried to kind of like assert their dominance and kind of secure, I guess you could say, an advantageous position in, European politics.
They both, they just both wanted to look glorious.
Yeah, I mean, despite the pomp and circumstance, Field of the Cloth of Gold did little to change the political landscape.
No, they still, like, honestly, they still hated.
Yes,
each other.
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, they
no,
were
but
the
even
biggest
during the
rivals.
time, they knew
They were the biggest rivals.
rivals. Exactly, yeah. And within a few years, England and France were at odds again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, exactly. And then, to be honest, I think pretty soon afterwards, Henry VIII formed an alliance with Charles V. So the whole thing was a complete waste of money.
Complete waste of time.
But a lot of fun.
But a lot of fun and allowed them to kind of, I guess you could say, demonstrate
And I mean, it again solidifies Henry's image in England as the Renaissance king. And that is Henry's early reign. That is what it's about.
chivalrous knight.
Chivalrous knight, glorious, sent from God, like bigger than life.
Yeah.
Almost not
Like me. I'm sent from God.
exactly bigger than life.
But no, yeah, I mean, I guess the Field of the Cloth of Gold, it does sort of still remain a symbol of the Renaissance's opulence and the kind of complex interplay of like politics.
I've actually
and
just Googled
spectacle.
it. And apparently the Field of the Cloth of Gold, in terms of the wider French economy, cost about 1/8 of the state's annual budget.
But they paid exactly the same amount, right?
I have no idea. I don't know. But still, that's crazy.
That is crazy.
All
So-
spent in 5 days.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think it was just a giant
More than
show.
1/3 of England's total annual income. They spent 1/3 of England's income on a 5-day festival just
That
with the
is
King's Wrestling. That is crazy.
Tina, wow.
That is nuts.
is
I mean, Henry VII would be turning in his grave.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. Okay. Wow. Like, well, anyway, that was super interesting discussion. As we said at the beginning, we're going to divide up Henry's life into 4 parts. So yeah, so basically we're going to do 4 episodes. So the first one now, so his early life and early reign. And then, so the next episode, we're going to do his first 3 wives.
Yep.
And then the episode after that, we'll do the break with Rome.
Loads of drama to come.
Loads of drama. And then the episode after that about Henry VIII will be about his next 3 wives, his final 3 wives. So, yeah, stay tuned. But, yeah, thank you guys for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Artie.
No worries, my queen. Why? I have a question.
Yes.
I always wanted to ask you this.
Oh, yeah.
Why are you such a fucking queen?
I'm just born like this. You know,
I'm born that way.
I'm just born that way.
Yeah, Gaga's song "Born This Way" was her being.
It was written about me.
It was about her and her being a queen, basically.
You know, some people are just born into greatness.
I know exactly, and some have a greatness thrust upon them, and that's me. So, guys, yeah, thank you for joining, and we will see you next time when we talk about Henry VIII's first 3 wives.
Stay tuned.
Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.
Ciao.